2. It appears that we do have the vast majority of our members with us this evening. So I do want to thank you. I know that we just met about 2 weeks ago to just talk about and update you as it pertains to us planning for the opening of school. So this is our first official meeting for this academic year. And I do have to say to you, if you refresh your calendar invite, attached to your calendar invite is a is an updated agenda that was just updated and was very minor. And I did highlight it. We do have our legal counsel on with us, Lisa Cremona. She is the attorney that works directly, with our group. And she called me right before to just remind me that public comments, we needed to move up to number 4. So to be in compliance, I went on and moved our public comments up from 8 on the agenda up to number 4. That was the only change, and that's why I revised it. So that agenda, it is indeed noted. Ms. Van Arsdale, I think that's you in 7-5. If you could mute, please. And Diane, I think you can mute Ms. Van Arsdale if you would mute her to avoid the background noise. And this is a reminder that if you're not speaking, to eliminate some of the background noise, if you will just mute, please. And Mark Murray is on. Mark is recording, as all of our meetings are recorded. So thank you, Mark, for joining us this evening. Laura, I do see Laura has joined us, and I want to thank the team that is here that we will be hearing from a little later on in the agenda, just to update this group in terms of where we are as a district, how we're continuing to provide the educational services for our students in this distance learning platform. And then starting Wednesday, students returning to brick and mortar. And I will talk a little bit more about that in my opening remarks. So at this meeting, I'm going to turn it over to our chair, Laura Feldman, to call the meeting to order. Laura, I'll mute and turn over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you. Having a little bit of problem with my camera, so I apologize. But thank you all for coming tonight. And I'm calling the meeting to order. It's now 5:34 p.m. And for our first matter of business, can I have a motion to approve the August minutes? Thank you, Reginald. And Carlos, were you trying to say something? You're still muted?
He said he seconded the motion.
Okay, thank you. All right. All in favor? And I say aye, because you can't see my hand. Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so next on our agenda, Ms. Carmona, would you please go over the policy 1.09?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to briefly go over policy 109 and also refer to you first to policy 1.097. I assume by now you all are familiar with that policy, and if you're not, staff can provide you a copy of that policy. 1.097 is the policy that specifically refers to the Academic Advisory Committee. Talks about the committee's purpose, mission, and areas of responsibility. It sounds like most of you have been members of this committee for some time, so I'm not going to belabor the point by reminding you of the work that you've been doing so well for the past few years. But I will go back now and just give you a quick overview of policy 1.09, which is the policy that governs all advisory committees to the board. So this is the 1.09 is the umbrella policy. It's a policy that governs every single one of the board's advisory committees. As you know, these advisory committees are meant to provide community members an opportunity to become effectively involved in the educational processes and operating processes of the school district. Each committee is governed by sunshine laws. I assume you've all had training in sunshine laws, and if you would like to have a refresher of that training, please let Dr. Sheffield know, and we can certainly provide you a full refresher training on the sunshine laws at a future meeting. It's kind of an extensive topic, so I don't want to go into the big details of that right now, just to let you know that we have the opportunity to provide you that training, and it is available upon request. Once you become a member of an advisory committee, you're also required to complete a conflict of interest form as well as view an ethics training video. If you have not done either one of these two things, we urge you to please do so at your earliest convenience. The term of office, members who are appointed to an advisory board are entitled to remain in that office for as long as the appointing board member remains on the board, or as long as the appointing member keeps them on the board, unless the board member wishes to replace them. Laura, I just saw your quick question. No, you do not have to do that form each year. But if there's anyone out there who has not completed the form, please be sure to do so. As you know, also advisory board members do not receive compensation, and we thank you all for your commitment and volunteering your time to assisting and supporting the students in Palm Beach County. Big reminder on policy 1.09 is that the policy contains a provision that requires automatic removal of any committee member who misses 3 consecutive meetings, unless that member has asked the chair of the committee for compassionate leave due to a personal, business, family emergency, or some other good cause. So just bear in mind that this is a policy, the automatic removal policy applies to all advisory committees, not just the academic advisory committee. Every committee is required to have an organizational meeting at the beginning of the school year. And I believe this is your organizational meeting for the school year. During this meeting, you are required to appoint a chair, adopt rules, and that include the meeting dates and times for this school year. So I believe that is why you have these items on the agenda for today's meeting. You'll be voting on a chair, chairperson, and then voting on meeting dates and times for this school year. There is a limitation on the number of years a committee chairperson may serve in that capacity. The policy requires that no one serve for more than 4 years. Advisory committees to the board are also required to meet at least quarterly or as otherwise needed to fulfill the committee's duties and responsibilities. A quorum, again, is a majority of the individuals who have been appointed to the advisory committee. It's important, by now you're all probably familiar with quorum provisions. If you don't have quorum, you can't take a vote, and then you can't proceed forward. So that is why it's really important that at the beginning of every meeting, a quorum be established on the record so that we know that any action that was taken during that meeting was indeed proper and supported by policy. Again, all committee members are subject to sunshine law, and you're also subject to public records law. So any documents that you prepare as a committee member, notes that are taken during these meetings, emails that you send out as a committee member in furtherance of your duties as a member of the advisory committee are subject to public records law retention. So any emails that you send into the district about your meetings, etc., those would be covered by public records law. As committee members, you also are subject to the Florida state laws regarding public officers. Even though you are all volunteers, you the law forbids anyone who's a public officer from doing business with his or her own agency. That means that if this committee were to vote perhaps on a contract with an agency or organization with which you have an affiliation with, you would have to exempt yourself from that vote due to a conflict of interest. Again, there's also other conflict of interest provisions that we can go over with during an ethics training if you so wish to have one later on. Lastly, the committee, advisory committees are allowed to have public participation, which you've had. Normally, we limit these to 3 minutes per person. Public comment must happen before any committee or board votes on a subject matter, which is why it's always advisable to just move the public comment section to the top of the agenda, so that if anyone wishes to come in and provide comment on an item that is on the advisory committee's agenda for that day, they've had an opportunity to do so and express their opinion before the committee takes a formal vote. Communications. This is probably the last, but one of the more important provisions of this is that only the board chair, the committee chair, can provide communications on behalf of the committee. And the committee chair is the person who is also designated to communicate with the board about the actions of the committee and to provide reports to the board about any votes, recommendations, etc., that the committee has taken. And again, we're reminded that per 109, we're asking that you look at page 5 of policy 1.09 regarding guidelines for communications outside the school district. Members of advisory committees, of course, will have personal opinions, actions, express their views outside of this. When they communicate, when you as a committee member communicate with the media, with any outside group or anything like that, you of course have full authority to comment in your personal individual capacity, but the policy asks that you please refrain from communicating on behalf of the committee unless expressly authorized to do so by the committee chair. And with that, that's kind of our quick overview of this policy. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I think you're all pros at this, so this is probably a rehash for all of you.
Thank you very much. And not hearing any or seeing any questions in the chat, I think we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Dr. Sheffield.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laura. And thank you, Lisa, for coming in with us this evening to help us start off our first meeting. And at this time, what we're going to do is, you heard Attorney Carmona, as we start up for the new year, that today we will be making nominations for our chair, vice chair. Then we will also have an opportunity to vote on how often we would want to meet. I think the current policy indicates that we should meet at least quarterly. That's the minimum. And so we have an opportunity to discuss, how do we want to meet? Do we want to continue our monthly meetings, bi-monthly, every other month, or quarterly? That's a discussion we will have this evening, as well as the time. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor for individuals that are interested in being nominated for chairperson. And if you want to nominate someone, then you would just type who you are nominating. If you're wanting to do a self-nomination, you will do the self-nomination as well. And again, we're in a new space with our virtual meetings. And this is going to be the first for all of us. Everything is tending to be the first through our current situation, right? And but we will get through it. So at this time, the floor is open for nominations for chairperson. If you would just type your nomination in your chat box, and then we will then proceed. I see we have one that's coming in, Charmaine. Hello, Charmaine. And Charmaine right now has nominated Laura Feldman. Laura is currently our chair. And we will leave it open for a few more minutes. Okay, so at this time, I will, with the group, and you are such an awesome group. At this time, I will go ahead and close the floor for the nomination of a chairperson. If there are any questions, I'm calling for the questions. There are none. So at this time, I'm going to again congratulate Laura. Thank you, Laura, for the awesome job, and looking forward to continue working with you for this academic year.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to working with everyone as well.
Okay, and then at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor. Reginald has already started, where I'm opening the floor for the nominating of our vice chair. And again, if you're wanting to self-nominate or who you're wanting to nominate, you will indicate here in the chat box. And I see that we already have Reginald has nominated Charmaine. Ms. Poston as our vice chair. So we're going to leave it open to see if we have any more nominations for vice chair. Okay, well, I'm going to, at this time, close the nomination for vice chair. I'll call questions. There is not any, so I'm going to congratulate Charmaine Poston as our vice chair. So thank you. Two awesome leaders, two awesome individuals to work with. And I'm just excited. I am excited. So congratulations, Laura, again, and Charmaine.
Thank you.
Okay, so Laura, you want me to just go ahead through all of the nominees? You want me to go ahead and just go through everything that we need to vote on?
Sure.
Okay, so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open up. As you all heard me say earlier, Attorney Carmona, as you heard her say, was we were going through our policies, is that we do this every month. We need to do this every year. And in going through and looking through policy is where I saw where it says that we must meet quarterly at least. So the minimum is quarterly. So I put on here to decide how we as a group would like to proceed with the meeting. So at this time, I will go ahead and start with, for those that if you will just indicate, I'm trying to see the best way to do this. If you are in agreement to continue with us meeting monthly, in which way we have met all last year, and then, currently we are on the floor for a discussion. If you want to continue meeting on a monthly basis, if you would just indicate that in the chat box. And we're talking about our voting members, right, Laura?
Correct. Yes.
Our voting members. So we have monthly, every other month, and quarterly. So if you would just make your notation, your name and your notation.
So if I could add in as part of the discussion, we had, this has come up in years past as to the timing. Yes. And going back a few years, the school board members actually asked that we meet monthly.
Okay.
And I think especially during this time with so much upheaval in the academics, that it's important that we pay attention to what's going on as well as the wishes of the school board members.
And that's understood. We're just going through the process, and the way things are coming in, it looks as if we will continue meeting monthly. So that's great. So I'm reading the comment box. Diane is reading the comments box too. So what we would have done and what we have accomplished in this process is that we followed the process. I wouldn't say Robert Rules of Order, because I think I've skipped some steps, I'm sure of.
We're all doing the best we can. It all works.
We're doing the very best we can. I'm going to give it a minute for everyone to get their vote in, but we could see where it's monthly. It is. So at this time, we will close and open for questions. And Diane, in looking at the chat box, you all could check behind me, but it appears that we will continue with our meetings monthly. Okay. And then the last voting item, and then we can get into all this other great, and this is great stuff too. But the last item will just be for our time. And then I would just say, if you're wanting to continue with our current time, you could just note in your box, continue with current time, 5:30 to 7:30, whatever you want to put in there. Because right now we're at 5:30 to 7, or if you wanted to move back in half an hour, 5 to 6:30. And trust me, I care it doesn't matter to me because I'm here regardless. Okay. Come on, you guys are still tight. Come on. Let me see. I see it coming in as current time. Okay. Dr. Diaz. Okay. If you could just go ahead and vote and put it in the box, and then we will have the records that we followed and took care of all of our business that we needed to start with. Okay, well, I'm going to close, and it appears in regards to us identifying our start time, and it appears in looking at those that vote, our members that voted, that we will continue with our current time of 5:30 to 7 p.m. So thank you. So we accomplished those three big items, which was selecting our chair and vice chair. Laura Feldman is continuing, and thank you, Charmaine and Laura again. And Charmaine is our vice chair. We will continue to meet monthly, and we will continue with our start time of 5:30 to 7. So thank you. Now we would move on into the update from myself. And in looking at the screen, we do again have some visitors. I have some team members you're going to hear from: Deepak, Mark Howard, and Keith is also joining us. But I also want to thank Dr. Robinson. If you haven't noticed her beautiful face, her picture there is joining us this evening as well. So we do want to welcome her and thank her for joining and participating with the group. So in terms of giving an update, I'm going to make mine brief because we are against, time, and I want to make sure that I leave more time for the team to really talk about the work in which we are doing here as a district. And what I will say is that, in this space in which we've been operating in since, I would say as a district, since March 13th. And we talked about it last month, and it's a lot. Things are just constantly going, and we have made some strides, some great strides, and we've also made some, I would say, some mistakes, some things that we would, if we had to do things over, surely they would be different. But what I can say is that you learn from them and you continue to move forward. And at the end of the day, what we're looking for is that taking, those those mishaps or whatever the case may be, learn from them and have those growing pains, and knowing that as you're working towards is that the greater outcome to all of this is going to be that we're going to be setting our students up for success. As I indicated, is that our primary goal here is that when we left on March 13th, is that if we got through the end of the year, was making certain that we prepare some robust systems and things, put some things in place, that our distance learning platform was going to be better than what it was when we left in the spring. And also working with our teachers, our instructional staff, district staffs, or what have you, to just make certain that we can continue to provide some instruction to our students in this current space. And I'm proud to say that I do see in the feedback that we're getting that we have made some great strides. It's definitely better than what it was when we left in the spring. I am excited about that. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But we are going to continue to work every day on that. And unfortunately, and I tell people all the time, unfortunately, sometimes our missteps or what have you, our challenges sometimes overshadow the great work that is taking place. And we don't hear about those great things. We hear about those things that are not working so well. So it's our job here, is to take a look, reevaluate, and just continue moving forward, because we have almost 180,000 plus students here that are depending on us. And we're one of, if not the largest employer here in this county. So there is a lot here at stake, but we're just committed to it. And currently what we're doing here as a district, you've heard, you hear us talk all the time and give you the updates in regards to what's happening. But right now in this space is that, we're continuing with the distance learning. We had a great start, the first 2 days or so, of course, we had some minor hiccups with the platform, where a kid or a teacher or somebody were kicked off or whatever. But they were immediately addressed in terms of giving more bandwidth, or whatever the case may be. Mark Howard, I think, is on tonight, and Deepa. And those issues and those things will happen. But the good side of it is that we have the team here that are in place and that are readily available, and was able to address those solutions, those problems right away. And on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday on the 16th, because now I think we're into week 3 of distance learning, I've visited some classrooms. I've seen some great things that are happening within the classroom. And we're also still continuing to take those constructive feedback and make those adjustments accordingly. But on Wednesday, we will be opening up our schools, 146 of our schools, for our ESC centers. Our ESC centers would be, the Royal Palm School and the Indian Ridge. Those are 2 of our inclusive ESC centers, along with our other schools that host our various ESC sites, cluster sites, or what have you. And in making certain that we are prepared, Keith is going to talk a little bit about that tonight, because the principal supervisors, the regional, the instructional superintendents, and Keith, they have been out there, working with the schools, setting up the schools. And Keith, you're going to hear in terms of what the buildings will look like, and how some things will look different from when the students left. But most importantly, what was important for us here at the district, and knowing that we are opening up our buildings here on the 16th, is that we're also, we are aligning our district staff that we have that are non-school based, but we are aligning those staffs. We have a plan in place where everyone is going to be deployed, including myself, and just making certain that we are out there assisting, that we're hitting the ground running in the trenches, and making certain that whatever support we can provide, however we can assist, if that's, providing some class coverage, whatever the case may be, because at this moment in time, we know our students are showing up. We know we have some teachers, that are, maybe requesting to work remotely, and there are some pieces that are still being worked out. But that's not going to stop the teaching and learning of our students. And what we're doing here to assist with that, we have a big training that's going on, because many of us, we are very much familiar, with the platform and all of those other pieces. But we're making certain that those other individuals that are being inclusive and going out on the ground, hitting the ground running with us starting on Wednesday when our students are coming in, that we provide them that crash course, that training as well in regards to what that looks like in our classrooms and how we can support our teachers, how we can support our students. And that's one piece of it that we're continuing with and we will be doing on tomorrow. And, with our ed tech, again, Mark Deepak is on the line. You'll hear from them a little bit, making certain that, we have our, technology staff out there in the regional offices, out there hitting the grounds, out there, boots down, everyone wanting to just make certain our students are indeed set up for success. So regardless in regards to, some saying that, we are not ready to open schools or whatever the case may be, Keith, again, is going to talk a lot more about that in the work and what has indeed been done. I'm just going to encourage, and I'll share my screen here real quick because I'm a very visual person, is that, and this information has been out there. We push as much as we can push out, via social media, through all of the different platforms and so forth. Are you all seeing my screen there? You should be seeing the district's webpage. If you just shake for me. Okay. This is a very robust, digital platform, for our parents, for the community. Everyone have access. I am not on the district hub. The district hub, meaning that you would have to have a district sign-on to get onto it. This is actually the platform here for everyone in the community have access to where they could see what is happening, how their child's school would look. It has the different video, a plethora of information as it pertains to the work here that have been happening here within this district. If you have not taken an opportunity, and I just clicked on that link that talked about the guiding document, the first part of this document was around in terms of the distance learning. But as I move forward, and I'm going to move forward there, I probably moved forward a little too quick, so I'm going to slow it down. This first part is always around the distance learning, and now we've been in distance learning for 3 weeks. I'm going to slow down so the pages would actually work. Is that what I wanted to get to is talking about this part here in regarding to us now returning to brick and mortar, how our campus is going to look, the work that the principals, the work that the principal supervisors, our teachers, that they have been involved in, the operational side of the house, and so forth. So there are indeed a lot of work that have taken place here in regards to the planning and getting our schools ready. Now, again, are we saying everything is perfect and we would not have to make adjustments? That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm sharing with you is in regards to the kind of work that this team has indeed been involved in. And no, we would not be going into the building on the 16th, not knowing which way to turn. Will we, again, have some run into some things to maybe we want to take a look at and have to make some adjustments? Absolutely. When does that ever not occur? So I just wanted to just share with you. I know I'm going through this a little fast here, but I wanted you to see this. Take your time when you get back, when you have some time, you can go through it, read it to your pleasure. But this, again, it's a guiding document. This is what we have been working, and what we have done here is that I've actually had taken the presentation we did to the board to talk about distance learning and returning to brick and mortar and put it in a friendly, in a family-friendly version of it to where the families, the students, and anyone that was reading this that was not affiliated with the school system could easily understand and interpret the work that is being done. This is a running document. It's something, it's fluid. It's something that we're constantly updating as we are making adjustments and changes in getting our buildings ready. So I just wanted to share that. But if I came back over here, you could see families. It talks about, the feeding sites, the distance learning. If you were to click on it, all those pieces will go right there. When our students open back up on the 31st, I think it was when we opened, and I may have shared with you before, that a big part of what we were so excited about, and you will also find it on there, is that we heard from our families in regards to some digital pieces that we could use and to help provide some form of an enrichment and remediation for our students. How could we assist with that outside of their classroom? And that's where we went, and we've created our version of the Khan Academy. It's called our Palms Academy. And we've gotten tremendous feedback. We have a team that's behind the scene here in curriculum that's actually creating it. Everything is tied to the Florida standards. All the support that we were providing, and I should say additional support, because we learned so much from this spring, is continuously taking place. And I just want to remind this group that even though that I'm talking about our students returning on the 16th for our ESE, for select ESE students, and then our other students will return the following Monday on the 21st, that we're going to have students in brick and mortar. And guess what? We're going to continue to have students in distance learning. So this will be the first time that I'm not going to just say Palm Beach County. It's going to be the first time that many districts are offering two platforms for educating their students. And I will hate to say it, that even when we get through this, I see this distance learning continuing. And we've learned so much. And this has just caused us to really stretch our thinking behind how creative we can get as it pertains to providing more opportunities for our families. So I'm going to stop there because I do want to allow time for the team to take a deeper dive into the work that is indeed taking place. But I just want to assure you that the team, again, we have learned so much. I'm going to stop sharing that we have learned so much during this process, growing pains and everything else. But what we do know is that the constructive feedback, we must be willing to take. We take the constructive feedback, we sit down, and we reevaluate in regards to how can we get even better. So again, this is not perfect, but our ultimate goal is just to continue to work towards making great strides and progress for our students. So at this time, I was talking.
Before we go on, I want to say thank you for the update. And I know there was a discussion about when we do the public comment and that it should be prior to anything that we are voting on. So if we could slip that in right now to be able to see if there's anyone who wants to give a public comment at this time.
Thank you, Laura, because I really miss public comments. Thank you.
Okay, hearing none, if we could now continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. So I guess we do not have any public comments. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark Howard. Mark is our Chief of Performance Accountability. And you all heard me talk about Mark at our last meeting. And I don't know where Carlos is. He was on my screen. And, I'm sorry. Yes, Carlos. And we talked a lot about, the internet connectivity, and then Deepak around the digital divide and so forth. And I'd ask Carlos, hopefully you will be able to add to some of this conversation in regards to those families that we still may have, we are missing and we're not able to make the connection with. So Mark, of course, will probably talk a little bit on that tonight or be able to answer some of the questions. So Mark, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Good to see you, Dr. Sheffield. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, if that's okay. And it's going to pull up a presentation that you should be able to see now coming in. And at any, Laura, I'm not sure how you want to do questions, but I'm happy to pause at any time. There are a couple of times in here that it seems kind of natural to maybe pause, but I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. And with that, I'll just get started. So, when all of this began in March, I believe it presented the district and the community at large with a greater opportunity. And that really was around something that should have been done very long ago around connecting families and connecting students. And we had some experience with this, and so we're calling this our digital inclusion project. Let's see here. Yep. And so as with this, any of our work, it should start with our vision and mission in mind, which is really what do we do to try to empower each learner to reach their full potential. So that part of this is how we provide a world-class education with excellence and equity. And we can't do that unless we give students the opportunity to connect in a number of different ways. So we kind of framed our challenge like this, that we were really trying to grant all students, regardless of zip code, access to reliable internet service. And this says in their neighborhood, but it really should be available in the home. And what we found was that not all connectivity was equal. And so we realized one solution would not fit everyone. So this was going to take kind of this series of solutions in collaboration with the community. And I hope that you'll see that as I present. When we talk about connecting students, we're really talking about connecting families. And while the district's primary purpose here is education, when we are able to provide internet access in the home and then follow that up with, some support and services, we have the opportunity to connect a family, not just to Netflix or YouTube, but to all of these other services that are now provided online that they wouldn't have previously had access to, such as telemedicine, mental and behavioral health services, employment opportunities, and the like. This slide really just illustrates some of our findings, and this is from Pew, but our data backs this up, that when we look at poverty, and we're looking at household income under $30,000, only about half of those homes have home broadband. What we find is frequently their sole source of internet in that home is a smartphone. And so we could have 3 and 4 kids connecting and trying to tether a laptop to a single smartphone. In March, when we went out, we didn't really know how long this would last. And essentially, we were just trying to get kids to connect, check in with a teacher here and there. But really, that's completely inadequate. We know that, as going into this school year, we raised the bar, and it was really about sustaining engagement. And so we, through the action of the board, enacted 2 short-term strategies. So I'm going to present to you kind of our short-term and our long-term strategy. And the short-term strategy was really over the, from the time frame of August through December. How do we get our students connected so they can participate in distance learning? And so we try to do this as judiciously as possible. The board allocated about $2 million in emergency funds, $1.2 million in these T-Mobile hotspots, which, as you know, are really flexible. They're expensive. They're even at $20 a month for each student on a 12-month contract. You're looking at $240 a year. In addition to that, we had an opportunity over the summer to kind of partner with a number of agencies to raise some money and begin testing this solution in the Glades. So what we were able to do through the United Way, Quantum Foundation, and others was to raise about $130,000 to put 450 hotspots out in the Glades to try to support summer learning. We learned quite a bit from that, and we also learned that sometimes it's a real challenge just to locate and engage the families to hand off the equipment. Then the other solution that we thought was, really economic are these Comcast sponsorships. We've been promoting the Internet Essentials program to our families for years. Comcast now has a program where agencies can sponsor a family for either 6 months or a year for that $10 a month. So, we are distributing these Comcast codes to a family that can then activate that code and have the Internet Essentials in the home prepaid for 6 months. And if they're a new Comcast customer, the first 2 months are free. So that's really an 8-month solution. Excuse me. Along with the district, the Children's Services Council also became a sponsoring agency, and they have a goal of sponsoring about an additional 1,200 families. So this was all to get us through the next 6 months. These resources, many of these resources are deployed, a lot of them being used. But I want to talk to you for just a minute about our long-term solution. In terms of, this is just a quick metric. At the beginning of school, that top row, we identified about 9,100 unique homes or, students that needed immediate internet support, that we passed out these Internet Essentials and T-Mobile hotspots. It's about 7,800 unique households. So let's talk about this long-term solution. And our long-term solution came about when some previous work we had done with Palm Beach County in the Pleasant City and Delray Beach areas. When the CARES Act dollars were presented, some of that money could be used to provide infrastructure for internet access for education. The county's leadership team made a commitment of $10 million in CARES Act funding to help put in infrastructure to provide a community Wi-Fi mesh. So we began working with the county. What we did, and I'm going to show you the map in just a second, then the county asked the school district to help prioritize certain communities or certain areas, and we did that. We identified some 21 different zones. We identified what would have amounted to 100 square miles of Wi-Fi coverage, if you can imagine that. Pretty extensive, right? And then we, with the county, they were able to identify how far this money would go. And it's going to cover about half of it, about 50 square miles. And I'll just describe to you basically what the goals of the project are. One, we believe in the coverage area, we can cover up to 25,000 free and reduced lunch students with free internet access. And then to do this, we would use the school centers as kind of the nexus where this Wi-Fi signal would be broadcast from. We've been working on this. Our first phase of this network will go live in the Glades later this month. And I'll just kind of share with you kind of the way it works, right? So what the county has been doing with a couple of contractors is kind of putting in, if you will, that last mile of fiber. So we know that there are commercially available solutions like Comcast, but we have families that don't subscribe. So it required us to kind of, the county to put in some of their own fiber and then leverage the district's fiber, other county projects. And then our schools will be where you see that root radio. We are repurposing our education network towers on each of our school to mount, a high frequency or a high density Wi-Fi signal that will communicate out to a series of these mesh radios that will be mounted throughout the neighborhoods. And that creates this mesh. The last piece of this is what you see called a Wi-Fi extender, which is similar to the router that you have in your house if you have Wi-Fi. One of those for each home, the price point on those is between $50 and $70. So we have already fundraised with our education foundation roughly $500,000. We have commitments for up to $500,000 to fund these Wi-Fi extenders. Florida Crystals is sponsoring about $60,000 to support our Glades families. So we have, excuse me, you'll have this presentation. This map identifies what we call these heat zones. So wherever there is the highest density of free and reduced lunch students, those were our priority zones. This is, just kind of a zoomed out version. But, we are doing in the Glades all the way from South Bay, Belglade proper to Pahokee and Canal Point. There are small pockets in Jupiter and Boca, but large swaths of high density student populations, as you can see from Riviera Beach down through Delray Beach, that will get this coverage. So we tried to prioritize with the county some of these, highest needs areas, and two that came up first were the Glades region and the Lake Worth Beach region. The Glades region, because there was just such need, and the Lake Worth Beach area, because they own their own utility poles, so the infrastructure was already in place to mount these Wi-Fi radios. Between those two areas, we'll have the ability to cover about 7,500 students at a cost of about $450,000 for these Wi-Fi extenders. So this is kind of like, excuse my language there, this is what it looks like from a county-wide investment perspective. The Palm Beach County government, those first two rows are the CARES Act dollars for the infrastructure between the fiber and the radios. They did identify another $13 million to add to the infrastructure that was needed for these mesh radios. The district, of course, is providing, the devices of the Chromebooks, and then the other $2 million that I mentioned in the short-term solution. But our community has also stepped up. You can see that right now, about a little over $1 million, and then there will be an additional $1.5 million or so in additional money for Wi-Fi extenders. When we talk about who's benefiting from these resources, these are the demographics of the population where these resources have been allocated to date. Some of those hotspots in Comcast are underrepresented. We have some schools that are still following up and entering these resources in our Destiny resource tracking system. So there's an undercount there. But you can see the free and reduced lunch, so I can move that. That largely this is benefiting our students who are identified as free and reduced lunch students, and a very large proportion of minority students, as well as our English language learners and our students with disabilities. And I will pause there. I think, Glenda, that's kind of before I hand off to Deepak. Deepak has slides on the one-to-one that will open for questions if you'd like.
So Laura, would you like to, let's have Deepak to go ahead and we can combine Deepak and Mark, or would you like to go ahead and open for questions?
Well, let's just see. Does anyone have any questions?
Right.
Okay, so let's go forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. And Mark, if you could stay on, because I'm sure that we will have some additional questions once Deepak is talking about the devices. So Deepak, thank you for joining us, Deepak. At this time, we're turning over to you, Deepak.
Okay, thank you so much. So district IT staff has been working diligently since March to make sure we focus on our goal to provide all our students and all our teachers with a device with camera to make sure they're prepared for distance learning. So we distributed 62,000 Chromebook devices to our students in March. That was for the remainder of the FY20 school year. And during summer, we were busy upgrading our infrastructure for wireless, as well as also making sure we upgrade our bandwidth from 24 gig with county as well as with AT&T to 40 gig, so that we are prepared for the blended learning. And also, we want to make sure that we are ready for the distance learning. And also, our district decided that they're going to invest around $25 million to make sure we buy a device for each student, which for one-to-one. Having said that, we distributed around 40,000 devices during August. And also, in the interim, we make sure our Glade schools are all one-to-one. So all Chromebooks are all deployed to our Glade schools, even prior to the start of the school, which is 8/31. We also made sure that any equity ratio for 80% and higher receive all the Chromebook distribution. The numbers, 36,274 is kind of a little old. As of today, we have distributed 42,000 Chromebooks. And also the total is around 142,000 devices distributed to date. As you all know, that there is, due to COVID, there's worldwide shortages of computers and devices, but we kind of acted for very earlier in the game, and we made sure our vendor HP promised that they're going to deliver 10,000 units per week in August until we are one-to-one. So we continue to work towards achieving our one-to-one goal. And as basically we are on track right now. As of today, we are on track receiving 10,000 devices until mid-October. Mark, can you change to the next slide? So all our high schools are expected to have all Chromebooks delivered to their respective schools by 9/23. We do have Windows HP devices required by our career and technical education. They'll arrive from mid to late September for the high schools. Middle schools, we will be completing their one-to-one by 10/5. Their career and technical Windows HP devices will arrive by mid-October. And all our elementary schools are expected to have all their Chromebooks delivered to them by 10/16. And with that, I would say we're working with our schools to make sure we have a plan for break and fix. We are working with our principals, our school techs, to make sure there's a communication there, because the first phase of the distance learning went very well. So we want to make sure that now the scope is pretty large right now. So we want to make sure that in blended learning model for both brick and mortar as well as distance learning work well for our parents. Our help desk has been working extra hours and available to our parents and students to answer any questions they have. So overall, I think we are ready and excited for our brick and mortar starting this Wednesday for our ESC students and special education students. And we will be making sure that all our issues are resolved in a timely fashion, and we support our schools as needed. Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, team, I'm going to again ask, thank you, Deepak, again, for just sharing with us in regards to, where we are. I'm sure that, we, again, still have, some students out there we're still trying to identify. And that was part of the conversation we had last month when we met, was around those students that we're still having difficulty in terms of trying to connect with in one way to where they may have moved. Are their phone numbers of things that are not updated. And so we still have teams that are out there where we're actively still trying to identify those students and close that gap of the number of students that we have not been able to connect with. And I think we have a question here in the chat box that came from Lar, Mark, and Deepak. What plans are there to support the charging of devices during the school day when schools are open for in-person learning?
So that's a good question. We thought about that, and all the schools will be provided chargers. We are already ordered chargers. Parts are in limited, or they're not available right now. But we are working with our vendor to provide limited supplies. So each schools will be provided, and we're working with school techs. They will be provided with the chargers, and each classroom will be provided some extra charges for students to charge their devices.
And Deepak, and I guess I didn't type it in the chat box, but you and Mark both, because this is a conversation that we've had here as a group, in here in house, is that we know too, and we do thank those families that allowed their child to use their own personal device for distance learning, because that allowed us the opportunity to utilize the devices that we have into the homes of those families that did not have a computer. So we do thank them for that. But it is not an expectation that those students travel to school with their personal devices. So can you talk in regards to how and what we are doing to make certain that we have devices on our campuses for those students that may not have had a device during distance learning? They utilize their personal devices, but when they return to brick and mortar, they would need to have access to a school device. Because many times we're talking about the laptops per se, but we tend to forget that we also have our desktop computers that are there on campuses. Many of our schools have, some high-tech computer labs. And we can do the social distancing because of the size of some of those labs that are used solely for testing, because many of our state testing has gone to computer-based. I know that was a mouthful.
No, that's a good question. So like you said, we thank those families. We did a survey, and we found around 75,000 students are using their personal devices. They will get their computers based on the dates I gave. So right now, the issue we don't see based on our number, because 923 high schools will receive all their Chromebooks. So they'll be 1-to-1. So we don't see the issue there. With middle school is 10-5, but based on the inventory of the schools, like you said about desktops and many of their resident computers they have. And also, we also have some small supply of Chromebooks at each of our schools. We think we're going to be fine, but I think if there is a need, if we see an issue with elementary schools, if some of them want to bring their personal devices, we'll accommodate that. We will make sure IT help desk and IT support work closely with that school to make sure our students are prepared to use the personal devices.
Okay, and Deepak, you have another question. Is that based on the presentation, we will be able to cover all 180,000 students, meaning that we're going to be going to a 1-to-1 by the end of December?
I would say middle of October.
Or middle of October. Okay.
Yes.
And that's if those devices continue to come in the way in which they're coming, because I think we're getting about 10,000 a week, Deepak? Is that what it is?
10,000 a week, and that'll continue till I think high school will be done 1-to-1 923. Middle school will be done 10-5. All our elementary schools will be done 10-16. The only gap would be CTE devices, which are Windows devices. We will get them also by middle of October. So my target is middle of October.
And thank you, Deepak, for bringing up the CTE. And the CTE is our career and technical ed. And we know that we have some of our CTE courses to where the Chromebooks, which our students are utilizing, cannot run some of those high-powered programs. AutoCAD or, some of those engineering programs and so forth. So the district did take a stance and have invested dollars in making certain that those students that were in need of those higher-end laptops to accommodate those special software and so forth, that we did do such. And Dr. Garcia, I know last meeting you were going to go back to your group and see, could you find out any information, pertaining to some. Did you make any? Do you have any feedback? You're muted. I'm saying Dr. Diaz, I'm sorry. You're muted, Dr. Diaz. Okay, we'll come back to Dr. Diaz once he unmutes. once we unmute, we'll come back. If Deepak and Mark, if you guys could stay on, because Dr. Diaz may have some feedback for us as it pertains to some things he were looking into for us. So at this time, I'm going to send him a note through okay, he's unmuted. Dr. Diaz?
Okay. Yes, I brought the issue up at a meeting of the of the Hispanic Education Coalition, and each party said they would see what they could do to reach out, and I have to get back in touch with the members to see what specific ideas they've come up with.
Well, thank you, Dr. Diaz, and Deepak is here. So we'll, as soon as whatever information you get, you share it with us, and we're definitely ready to deploy and work with those groups. Okay. At this time, our awesome Deputy Superintendent Chief of School, Keith, is going to come and just share with us about the great work that he has been doing with the principal supervisors and the school sites in being prepared to return to brick and mortar. And also, Keith will probably hit on in regards to the work that we are also doing with the healthcare district and the Department of Health, because we've definitely made some great strides and I just have to say thank you to both entities, the Department of Health and the Healthcare District, and just coming on and wanting to make certain that we as a district, that we understood some of, I would say that medical jargon. I was telling Keith today, Keith, you and I myself are not medical professions, so let's go to the experts.
You wait, Dr. Sheffield. You and I are going to be honorary.
I know we're going to be honorary members after this. And of course, Dr. Robinson has just been great having her on, here on staff as well, because there's surely some things that Keith and I just never even thought of. So Keith will probably hit on that, but we are just so indebted to the Department of Health and the Healthcare District for the partnership and the work that they're doing with us. So Keith, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sheffield. And again, good evening, everyone. It's good to see some of you, or at least some of your emojis for those of you who are not showing your faces. So thanks for being on here tonight. So I do want to provide an update of where we're at I know we talked about this briefly last month, and just an update of where we're at. So as you know, as Dr. Sheffield mentioned, we are opening to all students on the 21st and our special needs population on the 16th of this week, which is a couple days away. About 2 weeks ago, we provided a process for parents to make their choice on whether they prefer to come to face-to-face instruction or stay in distance learning. As of this moment, we've had 137,397 parents respond to completing to make their choice. Of that total, 58,950 families are choosing to come face-to-face, and 78,447 are choosing to stay in a distance learning model. This is broken down. This information is being broken down by school, by teacher, by period. So it's important to note. So a lot of that information is being used for other purposes, which I'll get into. There are great variances. I wouldn't say great variances, but there are variances from school to school. But just to give you an idea, the majority of all of our high schools have well over, at least over 1,000, except for a couple schools. High schools are a little bit smaller. Students choosing to stay in a distance learning. And some of them about half of them are probably about 1,500 or more. If I give you, for one example, John I. Leonard, it's shy of 14 students from being 2,000 of them wanting to stay in distance learning. So, how many of those have not responded? It's roughly about 40,000 that have yet to respond. We are doing another push out tomorrow for parents that have not, only to those parents who have not made their choice, for them to please select that choice. We also alerted parents that as of right now, if they want to change their decision and their choice, It will take up to a week to process any potential changes. So that is the current process. Obviously, with these kind of numbers, if 200 or 300 students choose to change their decision in a week's time, that's a great shifting for the school to prepare for. But currently, based off these numbers, does provide greater opportunities for the social distancing to occur on a school campus, which I'll talk a little bit more momentarily. Also, this data is also helping to provide information to our principals. So right now, HR provided a process according to policy 3.82 for those employees, and in this particular context, I'll speak just to teachers, the opportunity, if available, based on certain criteria of that policy, to potentially work in a remote setting. In particular, when we're talking about a potential for an ADA accommodation or actually a medical condition, a caregiver, etc. Obviously, the challenge this faces the principals. So if they meet that criteria, which principals, those first round were provided notification this weekend, and principals were given a list. Well over 1,000 names on this first round, I believe, that potentially met that first requirement of meeting the policy. Now principals need to review to see if they possibly can make that work in their master board, which is the process that they're going through right now. So the information that we're providing about how many students, for example, in high school is the most challenging when you look at trying to create a master board or change your master board. And then at the same time, how do we try to limit classroom changes for students that have already built relationships with their classroom teachers? So that's one of the things that we're currently working through at this time. PPE has been ordered for our school campuses. In particular, facial coverings have been ordered for both students and employees. Students will always see 5 washable face coverings. This aligns with policy 5.326, which speaks to, this was an emergency policy that's good for 90 days that we brought back to the board. So all students will be provided 5 washable. In addition, our employees were also provided this as well. Face shields were provided as an additional PPE for our teachers, and may potentially, according to the policy 5.326, used as an accommodation in some cases where we're talking where are more medically fragile and other students may need either additional PPE or some type of an accommodation. Additional PPE for those teachers and or paraprofessionals, other staff that are working with our most vulnerable students have been ordered. And for example, school psychologists, those who need to get closer to a child, they're what are called humanity shields. So those are those kind of like beehive-like outfits. So they cover your entire face and it's clear. So we've ordered it. That's an example of additional PPE that has been ordered for our most, those individuals working with our most fragile students. A lot has been done around policy 5.326, which enables a school principal to change the way a school looks to allow for social distancing. So one of the biggest questions that always comes up is around the classroom configuration and what does that look? How far apart will students' desks be? So schools have established to begin with that all student desks will be 6 feet apart where possible. Well, it's possible to start with, right? So all classrooms are built with 6 feet social distancing. As the need arises to add additional students to a classroom, principals will follow the guidance as outlined by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC, which allows us to go down to as far as 3 feet, as long as facial coverings are applied. Our goal is to maximize at the 6 feet where at all possible. Based on some of the numbers that are coming in, we should be able to easily abide by that. When you read the guidance outlined in American Academy for Pediatrics, the 6 feet is when facial coverings are not applied. Our policy calls for facial coverings being worn at all times. So, which allows us for, if the need happens, is to go down to that 3 feet. But again, we wouldn't go from 6 to 3. We would just add, if it's 1 or 2 more students this week decide to come back to school, we would add accordingly. But again, our goal is to maximize as much as possible. If it comes to the point where we can't fit additional students in a classroom, another big question that comes is what happens and we can't fit everyone. We will establish these overflow rooms or overflow spaces. So an overflow room or overflow space would be either a place where a principal establishes, if it's a high school, for example, it may be where they're going to have someone covering the auditorium throughout the day, where students on a rotating basis would, keep a list of students, so it's not always the same students every day, go into either like an auditorium or another location, and they would listen to the class via technology. So they would use a device to listen to the classroom via like a headset and through the Google Classroom. So, so this gets into the question that was typed in, I think, by Dr. Diaz. So will teachers be teaching both students in distance learning and those who are physically in their classroom? And the answer is yes. So to make this work, in some situations, we may have where it's just one or the other, but in most cases, to make these numbers work and the way they're laying out, there is no other opportunity. We have provided some guidance and support and training materials to principals and for teachers about how to maximize the fidelity of this process. Is it ideal? Is it what we want? Of course it's not. We don't want any of this. But we cannot be changing otherwise we'd be trying to change student schedules on a weekly basis, which is not good for students either. So this guidance and this professional development that have been provided for schools is basically, how do you maximize the technology? So where I put my webcam, it can maximize my teaching space for those who are watching in distance learning, but allows me to have that conversation as I would with my students who are there face to face. Again, that will be needed to be able to make this process work. And as we looked, every district that we've looked throughout in Florida and outside of Florida are using this process because of the challenge to allow for those families who choose to stay in distance and face to face to make it work for all. Also, a question that also comes up often is that students are going to be on their device the whole time, even when they're in the classroom face-to-face being instructed by a teacher. So, for example, I'm a student in a 5th grade classroom. I'll have my device. I will use my device as a teaching resource. So this is where all of our textbooks and things that we purchase through our textbook dollars are also provided in an online textbook. So students may use their online textbooks. They may use the Google Classroom where teacher posts certain curriculum materials to be used in a classroom. We see this often in our Trailblazer classrooms in the past. This provides a number of opportunities, but the direct instruction, my conversation, is interacting with the teacher while I'm there. what some of the rumors that have gotten out there is that students in the classroom, my teacher's here, but I'm going to be on a headset listening to my teacher in a Google Meet like we are here. That is not the case. I'll be interacting with my teacher face to face using my device as an instructional resource for instructional materials, things that teachers may post. So in addition, we're trying to also limit the amount of touch that of passing of papers. Can teachers still use that if they want to? Sure, but we want to minimize any type of exposure, and that provides a great resource. Also, if a classroom or a teacher, if certain students have to go in quarantine, if a case comes up, we want to make sure that students are comfortable and used to using a device, so that maximizes if they're going to, or a parent changes and they want to go in distance learning, that a student is more comfortable with the device, how to use it, to maximize that experience if they are learning from home. I'm just looking at the question. Ms. Feldman, can a parent be notified prior to the school day whether their child will be placed in the overflow room and then decide to keep their student home for that day where they will use a computer for distance learning? That will be too challenging for a school to try to figure out. It really depends on how many students show up. If we see a pattern where we know how many students are coming day to day, then potentially, yes, we could. And again, it doesn't mean this is more of a secondary issue that they would be doing this every day. It would be on a rotation if social distancing can't be met. How's the district working to dispel this rumor? So we put out, all principals last Friday sent out communication to their communities regarding some of these. There are also, all of our school principals are providing their own kind of, what is like our classrooms look like for our school campuses? What does it look like in our school based on our physical layout of our plant look like when we're in the hallways, or how we're maximizing that social distancing? And then, when it comes to that last example, so if I have to be quarantined, so I want to take a minute to talk about working with the healthcare district and the Department of Health. So we've been working with closely with both of the teams, Dr. Alonso's team and with Miss Darcy Davis and her team, and point person there has been Dr. Andrick, around that particular process. So in particular, I want to kind of unpack that process in policy 5.326 of when a school is notified of a positive case. So a principal will be notified either through a parent or guardian that self-reports that their child has been tested positive, or if they themselves have been exposed. That's one potential way that a principal will find out. The other is through the Department of Health themselves. So the Department of Health has a team that is led under Dr. Thomas, who does the contact tracing for all of Palm Beach County. She also has a team that is dedicated just for the education side of that process. So once a principal is made aware, and if it's through the Department of Health that a particular child or employee has tested positive, they will begin the contact tracing process. So we will provide to the Department of Health seating charts for classrooms and a list of a student will create a list, or younger students in collaboration with an adult will create a list of anyone that they have been in close contact with for more than 15 minutes, less than 6 feet apart, as outlined by CDC and school policy. There's any other information that the Department of Health is looking for while they go through their contact tracing. They will let the school principal know of those students who need to be quarantined. They will send the quarantine letters home to the parents. We just kind of finished some of this today, and we're actually going through over this with principals tomorrow. They will notify the parents and provide the quarantine letters. The principals will then enroll the students into distance learning. Principals will also then at that time notify the entire school community, all parents and guardians, of a positive case on a school campus, in that you would have been contacted. Would you have had to been quarantined? So in essence, you don't need to be quarantined because you were not contacted. You did not hear from the Department of Health or the school. So again, we'll let the entire school community know about any positive cases that come up on a school campus. I know that was another question that was out there. So the principals will send out that notification. The Department of Health will also let the school principal notify where enhanced sanitization needs to be conducted in collaboration with our school district officials. So I'm going to pause there for a minute because I've got a lot of information to check on questions that individuals may have.
We do have a question in the chat box about, dispelling that rumor, or the perception that our students may have regarding the overflow room. And Laura, I have 2 minutes before 7, so we may have to do a vote to extend the meeting by 5 minutes.
Do I have a motion to extend the meeting? Thank you, Reginald. To make the motion, I believe Dr. Diaz is seconding the motion. Any, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And since I still have my mic off, or on, the notification you mentioned, it goes to the whole community. Does that include the students who are learning at home?
Yes, it will be a call out to the entire school community. Yes.
Okay. And Dr. Diaz
has also a process of working on a dashboard that would show the entire community the number of cases throughout Palm Beach County and at what schools. But that's in the works right now as well.
There's a question in the chat. What are the medical criteria for closing a school?
So right now, the Department of Health, based on the contact tracing and the cases that come up, will, in the need to potentially close a school, will advise the school district if that need arises. We do want to try to limit that to the extent possible, and just do the contact tracing for those individuals that would need to be quarantined. In the last resort, we would look to the school closures. Again, we're working with them. That's the Department of Health that provides that guidance to the school district, and they look at the. They as the Department of Health and both the healthcare district both say, and Dr. Alonso, it's not an exact number or exact formula. It's assessing the entire situation based on cases at the school.
So I have a couple other questions. Has there been consideration of using clear masks for sign language? I've seen some sign language classes. I've seen some where the area over the mouth is clear, but the mask itself is sufficient enough to be protective.
Yeah, we're providing shields.
No, this is different than a shield. This is an actual mask with a cutout in the center that has clear plastic so that the mouth can be seen.
I've not heard of that, so we'd have to check.
I'll send you stuff I've seen, and
we can get it to Mr. McCormick and Director for ESE to see if they've looked at that. I know they are using the Humanity Shield, which covers the entire and shields covers the entire face and allows the face to be covered open so you can see lips moving.
I was actually referring to the sign language classes, where the American Sign Language is a foreign language classes that you find in high school, specifically, so not just ESC students, but for all students.
Yeah, so please send us that information. We'll look at it.
Okay. And I realize that there are rules about which types of masks are acceptable. How will that be checked? And I'm not suggesting it should be done in any form of a punitive fashion, but who and how will that be monitored?
So there are certain facial coverings that are not approved that are probably easier to address on a school campus. Those are the ones with valves that you see. They're not supported by the CDC. The neck gaiters, those are more easily able to be addressed. And again, yeah, there are processes that they're 3-ply. So again, you know, even on the old mask that I had actually literally cut it open to see if it was 3-ply, to see if it was actually 3-ply. So
that defeats the purpose of the mask if you had to cut it. But
so
yeah.
that's why we're providing those to the students to make sure that they're following that. So we will, you know, principals will use that, you know, process. But is there a facial covering police to see if it's 3-ply? That's not the process. No, we're not doing that. We want to make sure there's a facial covering, you know, so a visual observation. But the ones that will stand out easier are the neck gaiters, the ones with valves, et cetera.
So
Those are the biggest ones.
So if you have a student who starts later within the, does not come to school September 21st, but maybe let's say starts October 1st, will there be masks waiting for that student when they arrive?
Yep.
Or is there going to be perhaps some way in SIS to track whether or not students have received the masks so that you not keep, does it matter if we keep giving masks to the same kids?
You know, we're not going to be able to track that in SIS. I mean, you know, we're going to do our very best. All we can do is the best we can. You know, surely, you know, the schools may have and try, you know, to keep a spreadsheet of whomever that they're providing, you know, their PPEs to. But there is no way we're going to be able to do that in in SIS. And, you know, in regards to us being able to tell if it's a 2-ply, a 3-ply, or whatever kind of mask it is, I think he, you know, hit it right there. Again, we just do not have, you're just not going to be able to do that. All we can do is provide the 3-ply mask and hope that the mask that the students are coming in where, you know, those without the valve, I think I'm saying that right. But you get the gist that all we can do is hope for the best, because that's easily to tell that that's one that we have that's not acceptable. And if they come with one that's not acceptable, we will provide them with one of the ones that the district is providing. So
schools will also have additional disposables on hand for those students who come without a face covering on a particular day, so that there's not an issue there. If they forgot theirs or whatever for that day, they'll have additional.
It would be the same thing in aftercare. You know, aftercare, of course, you know, the students would have been in school during the day, so they should show up to aftercare with their mask if they're participating in aftercare. But of course, you know, we realize that we're dealing with, you know, with children. But if their mask or something is lost in between, we will have, you know, that mask to provide them when they get to aftercare. You know, we're just going to do our very best and to have those things readily available.
Dr. Diaz,
Same thing that we would do as adults. We're assuming all adults are going to get out and have their PPEs, their masks and so forth. So, my ask today is that if I have someone that show up on a campus that forgot their mask or whatever the case may be, we will have one there to give it to them. I think Dr. Diaz, you said?
He asked a good question that we get often. What happens if a student refuses or employee refuses to wear a mask? So, so the principals will file the student code of conduct accordingly, and also in policy 5.326, if the student continues to refuse and not follow direction to put their face covering on, it can be enrolled in distance learning. And that was very important, a part of that policy as it concerned the principals and many others for those who just are refusing and putting others in danger. For a teacher, if a teacher is refusing, I'm not sure, that would just follow, what's the word I'm looking for, Glenda? Progressive discipline, but obviously, if they're refusing, we would want to find out why, if maybe they need an accommodation of some sort. So we would inquire before taking any type of aggressive discipline.
So, Reginald, would you like to make another motion to extend by maybe 10 minutes? 10 minutes, great. Do we have a second? Thank you, Carlos. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I have a question also about teachers who were teaching virtually. For example, in high schools, because that's when I think you're more likely to have a teacher only one teacher or maybe two teachers on campus who are teaching a particular subject. And if that teacher has one of the conditions described as the CDC as a priority to need to be teaching from home, is there an idea that perhaps you could have one teacher working from home teaching multiple students from multiple schools on that particular subject so that resources can be maximized?
I'm not sure I understand. Can you give me an example?
Okay, so Teacher Smith has health conditions, is going to work from home, but Teacher Smith is the only teacher who teaches AP Physics in the school. But the health conditions are real and need to be taken care of. So the teacher's going to work from home. But let's say you have only half of the students have chosen to, well, this works for only part of it. So half the students, let's say, have chosen to come into school and half want to do distance learning. So if that teacher's doing distance learning, can that teacher teach other students from other schools as well? So half of the class could be from one school, the other half of the class could be from a second school. And the counter to that is, what happens to those students who've decided to be in school and there isn't a teacher there with that expertise to teach them because the teacher has the health conditions that need to be considered?
So right now, we have not created any kind of district-wide type of pool due to a number of challenges creating like a district-wide type approach. We will look at it at an appeal process if the school cannot. So in your example, I see it very hard for the school trying to make that work in their master board, and they wouldn't be able to support remote teaching at that time. So the employee would either have to report to work or take one of the other leave options that are available to him or her in that process where the school can work to fill that position. Your last part was, so one of the challenges that, an unknown is to that question. We don't know at the last moment, will we have if we're unable to accommodate a number of remote working opportunities for teachers, could we see an uptick in the number of leaves? Possibly, we just don't know at this time.
So
we have to work on coverage and hiring where we can. So that's what one of the challenges we're working through at this time.
So, okay, but here's another sort of follow-up to that. Let's say that teacher does go on leave, but then you're still left with, let's say, 30 students who want to take this physics class, and now you have no physics teacher at the school. So will there be an opportunity for those students to utilize the distance learning and work with a teacher from a different school?
So those are
period.
some of the things that, behind the scenes, we're having conversations on all the different variables and scenarios, just like the one you're bringing up it has come up, and we're looking at what are potential solutions to that scenario.
And I take it we don't have a decision yet as to what the solutions are.
Well, there's too many scenarios. There's more scenarios than there are solutions, because one solution leads to another challenge. So if I take these distance learning only to your example, I'm taking reducing the number of students at other campuses. Then we run into a cost variable for the district, because we could be creating, if cost wasn't a factor, we could add a lot more teaching units. But unfortunately, the numbers that we're talking are so great that we can't solve for every single situation that comes up.
Okay.
From a financial standpoint.
Got it. I was hoping in some ways that this could be a solution down the line for how to deal with our schools that don't have teachers to teach particular courses. But this way we could still enable students to have access to those courses across our district and make the course selections more equitable. So.
Absolutely. I understand the intent, and I'm trying to solve for, believe me, keeps me up at night. So as we try to solve for the multitude of number of scenarios that come up.
Keith?
Yes.
Keith, just an idea. If the teacher in the classroom teaching face-to-face can handle both the students in the classroom and the ones remotely, and you found yourself in a situation where you don't have a physics teacher, you could create a virtual setting where the teacher from home could be addressing those students who are at home, and then have a big screen where that person could address the students who are in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked at length about that. And trying to figure out if that's a potential way to make it work. Yeah, so it's almost kind of like the reverse.
It's the reverse situation to what you're having the classroom teacher doing. When you walk in the classroom, you expect to find a teacher there, but you might find a screen. And the live teacher's at home. Just an idea.
Absolutely, it's a good one indeed. Again, the issue there to a point is the coverage. So who's watching the kids who are physically in the building, and again, the additional cost factor that comes into play.
All right. Well, thank you, Keith.
Thank you all.
Sorry, I have one more question. Regarding bathroom cleanliness, I know that this in the past has been difficult for schools to maintain bathrooms cleanliness and have them in good working order for whether it's vandalism or other such reasons or whatever it may be, that this has not been a smooth process, I think, for many schools. So considering the importance of cleanliness and et cetera, and how will this be different this time?
So custodians are doing enhanced cleaning throughout the day, and to help accommodate that for the daytime, they're moving additional nighttime staff to the daytime staff to have more going throughout the building to do that enhanced cleaning throughout the day.
And will there
Plus,
be?
you'll have fewer students.
Yeah,
But to start with.
And there
Right.
is also, Laura,
Soap supply and things like that.
and all of that is on page 17 of that reopening guide in
Okay.
regards to the cleaning, in regards to the cleaning protocols, and it talks about, what the maintenance team has done over the summer, what they are doing now, and how that will look different. So again, I mean, you're doing the best you can, but I think, maintenance is on page 17, the modified building. It talks about the maintenance piece and the custodians staff.
Thank you for answering all my questions.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and again, appreciate everyone and your questions. Those are great questions. These are very challenging times and difficult solutions for every scenario. But the more questions you give us, the more helps us to make sure that we're getting the word out so that people understand. We know the parents have many questions that lead to additional questions, and we understand that. And principals are sending, again, going to send more information out this week regarding what their particular school campus looks like, again, to assist families throughout this process. So again, thank you and appreciate all of you and your participation tonight.
Sorry, I just realized I reviewed my list prior. There was one question I didn't ask, but for buses, and I realized that we're not able to do a lot on the buses, but has there been any discussion about needing to keep windows open or air filtration or what we can do to make a difficult situation at least a little bit safer for people?
Yeah, so at this time, because of the weather as it is, the decision was made to keep the windows closed. Face shield coverings are required on our school buses at this time. So we're going to, obviously, for probably who knows how long. In addition, bus drivers will have disposable facial coverings for students who come on a bus without a facial covering.
And students will be have assigned seating, and all of this assigned seatings and so forth is to assist with the contact tracings and what have you. And again, and as it pertains to the modified transportation and what that will look like, that's on page 30 of that reopening guide.
All right, again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you all. And Laura, I'll turn it back over to you if you want to.
Great. And before we adjourn for our next meeting, if people can come with topics that they want to cover in the future, but I suspect at our next meeting we will need another update as to how things have gone now that we're in the process of delivering both in-person and remote learning.
And then, Lauren, I'm looking at the calendar, and our next meeting date I have as October the 12th. Is October 12th? But I have a pencil on our calendar as October the 12th being a holiday. I will need to look to see what holiday that is.
I'm looking it up to see.
Columbus Day?
Oh, we've met on Columbus Day in the past, as I recall.
Okay. All right.
If everyone's okay with that, if anyone has any objections, let's do it that way. Can you write in the chat or voice them? Okay, hearing none and seeing none.
Glenda, is it all just
No, it's just the pencil.
Okay.
It's just the pencil. You work, Keith.
Laura, it's also Philippine People's Day.
Oh, great.
Just to make sure you get a multicultural perspective on October the 12th.
This is good. This is good.
Columbus
Yes.
is the Western perspective. Philippine People's Day is the Eastern perspective. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Laura, you want to adjourn?
Yes. So, motion to adjourn. Okay. Bonnie, I believe, is motioning. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Okay.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. We appreciate your assistance.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.